Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history, they make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Hello, everybody. My name's Jack McCullough. Welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. You can follow us online at rockstarcfos.com. I'm really excited for our guest today, someone I deeply admire because she actually got off the CFO path to pursue her dream in the art world. Her name is Sho-Joung Kim-Wechsler, and I almost called you Kim. I apologize. But so welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Jack, I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's a huge honor. I'm not 100% certain if Secrets of the CFO Rockstar is the right topic for me, but I will try my best.
Well, it was 10 years ago when we first met, and you've definitely had a different path. But, you know, one thing, and I normally don't mention our YouTube channel, but I'm going to today, if only because So has one of the best, the best Zoom background that I've seen. So it's worth going and watching this video. I know most people are listening, but if you get a chance to check us out on YouTube, it's a pretty cool background. So, so I would guess approximately none of my listeners are familiar with Exverso. What can you share about your company from the 10,000-foot view?
So Exverso is a premium art marketplace for digital art where people can discover incredibly amazing artists, but they can also purchase the art. And we also started our services for installations and creating specific installations for offices, for casinos, as you can see in the background that I have right now, among many others. And it's all about transcending digital and physical spaces. So digital art is a new medium. A lot of people are very curious. They want to learn more about it, but they're very unfamiliar. So we are trying to really bring digital art closer to everybody.
Well, that's certainly a noble goal, and we'll definitely get into that in a moment. But before we do, I always like to chat with our guests about, you know, their really informative years. And so where did you grow up?
Okay, so this is we could probably do an entire podcast on where did I grow up, but I'm Korean, obviously from the way I look, I guess, but I was born in Germany. My parents were immigrants to Germany. And I spent my life there, my youth, studied business and economics in Germany, and then moved to the United States. And initially, it was supposed to be just a 2-year secondment in New York, and it turned out to be many, many years after, and I'm still here.
Yeah, that was with Deloitte, as I recall, right?
That was with Deloitte.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You mentioned you're ethnically you're Korean. But you spent your childhood in Germany. So I know right now there's a pretty robust Korean population in Germany, but was that the case when you were a child?
I wouldn't say robust. I think it's a couple thousand Koreans, not very big minority. It was very different. Let's put it this way. There were not many Korean immigrants in Germany at the time.
So yes, but it has grown since then. That's my understanding anyway.
Yes, and yes, it did.
So cool. Well, I also like to ask, so did you have brothers and sisters?
I do have 2 brothers.
Okay. And are they still in Germany, or did they?
Yeah, they live in Berlin.
Oh, okay, great. And what was your first job as a child?
Oh, so Jack, that was a tricky question because I was thinking, because I did a lot of jobs. And which one could be the most interesting one? So one of the interesting ones was I was working at the local fair to sell fried champignons. So I was about fried mushrooms. So I was about, I don't even know if I legally was allowed to work at the time. I was still in high school, very young, and I was saving money for, I think, my driver's license or something like that. And it was a lot of fun. I loved selling fried mushrooms. I enjoyed it so much.
Interesting. Yeah, it's that's a question I ask a lot of the guests, and about 9 out of 10 tell me their first job had something to do with food. Now, you know, most of them, all but a handful of my guests have been, their childhoods were spent in America. So a lot of them worked at like McDonald's or Wendy's or someplace like that. But yours is a little more interesting than that.
I worked at McDonald's too, by the way.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to work at McDonald's at some point in your youth, right? So it's like a law or somewhere somehow, but quite a footprint that company has made. But so you went into business after studying business after undergraduate, but at a young age, you knew that you loved art more than business, I think, even as a child, is probably fair to say. So can you talk about that decision a little bit to first focus the early part of your career on business?
Yeah, sure. I think, and I've been asked a lot of times, right? Why did you move into business? Why did you move into the art industry? What is it about art that you like so much? And, I did a lot of, because I get this question so much, and I was thinking about it intensively, and thought about, when was your first encounter that you knew art was the place to be at? And I remember one of my first impressions from kindergarten. It was a poster of Pablo Picasso's Girl with a Dove, his daughter Paloma. And I remember the time while the kids were playing outside on the playground, I was standing in front of this picture and studying it. And I was really, really moved by the colors, by the light, by animals, by the dove. I love animals. So for me, this was such an such an enlightening moment where I realized, this is something that really, really speaks to me. It was very vivid for me. I have a lot of memories of it and associations. And I realized, I really do enjoy looking at the world from a visual perspective.
Okay, interesting. And yet you studied business undergrad. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we don't have like this. We at that time, it's changed now, but at the time we didn't have like the undergraduate graduate kind of differentiation. So
Okay.
after high school in Germany, you have to decide which path to go, and then you're kind of set. So after high school, I was set to go into business and economics.
Okay, cool. Yeah, a little different, but again, you eventually found your passion in art. But so you started your career in Deloitte, and that's what brought you to the United States. So
That is correct, and I always like to I was always like to quote Simu Liu, the famous actor who was the first Asian Marvel hero, and he was fired from Deloitte in his first year. That kind of motivated him to follow his acting route. And honestly, I wish Deloitte would have fired me in the first year because then I would have been closer to art much faster. But at the time, unfortunately, they didn't fire me, and so it took me a longer time to get back into the art industry.
yeah, but it's funny to want to be fired, but I'm sure at 22 and having bills and things like that for the first time in your life, you probably weren't trying to get fired. But
Of course, right? At the time, when you look back in hindsight, right, you're like, of course, it would have been a disaster. You would have the expectations from your family, everyone would have been, oh my God, she got fired. But sometimes I always believe that the failures that you have or that you perceive as failures or the bad moments are actually the ones that you learn from the most.
so you're familiar with a comedian named Bob Newhart?
No, not really.
He's probably in his 90s right now. He's iconic amongst American comedians. But he was actually fired from an accounting job. And so he went out and people thought he was funny, and he went out and did the equivalent of like a stand-up routine, like open mic type of thing. And apparently he just killed it and never looked back. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, he was similar to the reference you cited that just had he not been fired, everything would have been different for him. So, and probably worse because, I'm sure he led a great life as a comedian. So, but so you went to Deloitte and then PwC, you had a couple of jobs. You and I met when you were at First Dibs, if memory serves. And then followed things started to come together. You left First Dibs to go to a company called Artsy. And tell us a little about, personally, I don't, I'm not confused at all at why you were drawn to Artsy, having known you for a while now, but tell us a little about what Artsy was and, why you made that move at that point in time.
Yeah, it was. I think maybe we can step back, and it's interesting. Thank you for pointing out that we met. I remember exactly the day we met. So in the summer in New York, So thank you for reminding me of that. And it was more by chance than anything else, really, because I kind of felt like, first, this was already an incredibly cool experience because I learned so much about online marketplaces. I had, as a finance person coming from a private equity background, M&A, transaction, accounting, finance, and then private equity. I had zero operational experience, number one. Number two, I had no technical experience with e-com platforms. So I learned a lot on with First Dibs and David, the CEO. And so it was a fantastic time. But I knew I wanted to go into contemporary art, which is really my passion. And so Artsy came my way, and I was really drawn by the mission and vision of the founders at the time. And I thought, okay, so it's very, very small. There were about 40 people, but I thought it had huge potential because it had this incredible vision of conquering the world with art and making art accessible for everybody with an online access. So I really loved that about Artsy. And Artsy had a lot of different type of touch points because it was obviously working with galleries, but also museums, with auction houses. So it was very, very interesting to be there at the time.
Yeah, it must have been, like, for you, as close to a dream job at that point in your career as you could possibly have had, right?
It was the absolute perfect combination of art, finance, and technology. I have to admit that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was wonderful.
And is Artsy still, forgive me for not knowing this, are they still around, or do they merge with somebody, or?
No, they're still around.
Okay,
They're still around, and I think they're doing well. So yeah, they continue to exist, and they've grown a lot. So
Okay,
I
good for
think
them.
they're,
So
yeah.
cool. So one of our early conversations, you mentioned you had a desire to bring art to the Silicon Valley. You mentioned that there's
Yeah.
a need for it and an appetite for it, and so why not? So tell us a little about that, like what inspired that desire, because obviously it worked out for you.
It was very interesting because I forgot about so when you're in New York City, obviously you have arts and culture all the time. Same thing for Boston, where you're from. It's not imaginable to have a life without art. You enter an office and you have an incredibly beautiful art piece in the lobby. People care about art, but it's interesting to see that this is not applicable for the majority of people in the world. Because I lived in a very tiny niche environment with a community of very, very focused art people, art professionals, and art lovers. And in New York City, where you have the largest number of galleries in the world. So to me, I quickly realized when I left New York that this is not how the majority of people in the world actually function. And so for me, it was interesting to learn about that and to leave my little bubble where I was in, because it was really I have to say it was very, very artistic, and people care about like a lot of crazy things that normal people don't care about. And so leaving that by accident, because my husband got relocated to Silicon Valley, I was still working at Artsy at the time, but I wasn't really sure what I'm going to do next. So I wasn't ready to retire or anything like that. And so I love my job. I love working. And so we realized, what, this is a community that has not the same type of art culture as New York has. And so what can we do to get them excited about art, as so many people, in these big cities are?
Yeah, that's interesting. And art now, it's you mentioned it's no longer oil and canvas, right? It's art. Art in 2020s is largely influenced by technology. Is that fair to say?
I would say it this way. There's still a very large group of people who are very skeptical about digital art. But then at the same time, you have so many artists that are, even if they're traditional artists, have moved on into technology medium, just because they realize, we can create experiences and spaces in interactions in ways that we cannot do with acrylic on canvas, for example, or oil on canvas. And it is a new medium it's not a new medium in the sense of art history, because digital art existed since, or technology-driven art existed since technology started developing with humanity, but it was always a very, very, very tiny niche of a niche of a niche group. And through blockchain innovation, for example, and the huge hypes during COVID, people started paying attention to digital art and digital creators. So it was a very interesting move. While maybe not every result of it is something that is positive, but overall the innovation has been made and people are aware that there is a concept such as digital art that exists today, and there are people who collect it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So here's a question I never thought I would ever ask anyone, but what do you think Picasso, since he was so inspirational to you, what do you think he would think of the modern movement? I mean, he was a guy that, he was known for, being on the cutting edge, right? So
yeah, I had a very similar, Jack, we talked about this. I had a similar conversation with on a different type of interview, and the question was, well, what would these artists do today, right? Because they were visionaries, innovators, and they defined their genres and they created new genres. And Picasso obviously was, laughed at when he created his cubic images, right? And cubism was an insult to this artist. So the critics were laughing at him. Everybody was laughing at him. So I think that a lot of the artists at the time, because they wanted to drive something that is, different, defining a genre, defining a new medium, and they definitely would have explored technology as a new angle and a new vehicle, just because they were not interested in mainstream art, right? Like they were not interested in like taking some portraits for commercial purposes, right? They were really focused on defining their own genre and defining their artistic style and skills. So I think that many of the artists, if they would live today or if they were active today, would work with digital medium. And even like Hockney, right? When you think about Hockney, it's one of the most important contemporary artists today. He created a series on iPads, so it was drawings on iPads. So it was pretty revolutionary. So I think that digital medium is just at the beginning of the development. It will become more and more relevant. And now we're starting to also really creating ways. Technology is so advanced now that we can create, alternative realities, we can create metaverses. And so I think it's just the beginning of digital art in many ways.
oh yeah, I have a niece, she's studying modern design at RTI, and she's a junior. She just finished her junior year. She's entering her senior year, and the field has just changed dramatically from when she started, But it's interesting because she's created some infographics for me, and she's sort of done it what we might consider an old school way of doing it. And since she interned for me last summer, but since then we've done some that are more with AI type of technologies, and hers do resonate with the audience a little bit better than the computer generated stuff. It's not that they are better or anything like that, but it's just kind of people sort of like they can see hers and recognize that it was probably done by a human being versus being done by a computer. And we're still at that point. People think they like it, so they prefer that. So
and I do agree with that, because when you think about AI generated art, I mean, there's always like this tiny thing that makes it look not human.
Mhm.
And so I think that's like also specific to AI and where it is today. But aside from AI, there are so many other technology forms that you can create works, from digital illustration to iPads to algorithms to create art. So there are so many different ways on how to create digital art.
Yeah, and it still has a way to go. Like I was on Chat GPT and wanted to, I loaded my wife and I a wedding photo and asked them to make a sort of like a cartoonized version of it. They gave my wife a beard. I know you've never met Beth, but she never had a beard, certainly not on her wedding day. So it's like, okay, this technology's, it's a year or two away from being perfectly usable. So
yeah, exactly. And God knows like how long it will take, right? There's also, I mean, I don't know, this topic on AI is going to be a completely separate topic also, Jack, that we should probably have. But AI is a very interesting topic, and I I understand there's obviously a lot of hype around it, but also a lot of fear. But I think it still is going to take some time until machines can fully replace us.
Yeah, I would think so. And I'm retiring in a couple of years, so I think I'll probably be done before machines would have taken my job. But so when we were talking last week, you had a quote that it really resonated with Jess and me. And the quote was, "You have a concise understanding of who I am." And you shared it in the context of sort of going from the world of business to, you're in both roles now. You sort of get your feet partly in art and part in business. But share with the audience what you meant by that.
Oh, this is also a good question. I love it very much. Thank you for pointing that out. It was more around expectation management. I think what happens when you're an entrepreneur, you spend first of all, you spend a lot of time with yourself, right? And similarly to an artist. And sometimes, I love working with artists, for example, because we share that completely. We have this in common. And, as an artist, you constantly have to think about creative concepts and what do you want to accomplish and what's your vision and how does it, what medium to use and how to present it and how to sell it to an audience. And in many ways, this is similar to a startup founder. And so you spend a lot of time with yourself and, oftentimes against the odds and skepticism and, critique of everybody else around you who's not doing what you're doing. And so I think because of that lesson learned in these last couple of years of really being a focused entrepreneur, I realized that there are so many things about what it means to being yourself and to follow your vision and to follow your instinct. And I learned that this is the only way for me at this moment and also for this company to go. And no matter what the perspectives are, there are so many that get shared with you, and there's different agendas, different thoughts, different, whatever the viewpoints are. And there's only a limited amount of that's actually relevant for you and that's actually beneficial for you. So you as a person, as an entrepreneur, you have to really come to terms very quickly who you are, because if you are insecure, if you don't know which direction, you follow a path that is other people's interest, but that is not necessarily the intention and the agenda and your vision of your company.
So that makes sense. So that's a great segue to talking about Xverso.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the risk of the most obvious and cliched question I might ask during the course of this interview, but what inspired you to create Xverso? And then how is it different from other digital art marketplaces?
Xverso was the continuation of the art fair we created in Silicon Valley in San Francisco at the Palace of Fine Arts. And at the time, I wanted to create something that is not your standard art fair. So I wanted to have something that has the combination of physical art, digital art, but also experiences. And for example, we had a huge speaker conference, we had music, but we also had a lot of digital art and different type of digital art projects that the world has never seen before, such as, the first Porsche art car where you could tweet If So What or Porsche or California School of Arts, who I partnered with, and it would basically project out sound and colors onto the Porsche. And that was really fun. Or we had a virtual reality garden, sculpture garden with sound and smell. So this was one of the first ones, and a lot of projections. And so it was so interesting to showcase these innovations that were not, from traditional artists in the sense of traditional art world, but really engineers and a lot of different type of professions. And it was fantastic. And to me, it was very clear that this will be the future of where things are going. And based upon all these experiences that we had and all the learnings and the successes and the failures, I guess, we created Xverso because we wanted to bring that across, this excitement for digital art, for community, for interaction, and anything that's actually really great about art and the art world into a new type of, platform such as Xverso. And how are we different? I think we're different because we're focusing on premium artists. So not everybody can join us. So we're curating the artists very carefully. We're curating the artworks very carefully. But we're also different because we have already this existing big community globally of art lovers and art enthusiasts, and we are continuously showing, incredibly unique works that are not available anywhere else.
It's a great position to be in. And then, so your background, finance and business, and is that influenced your approach to running Exverso? I mean, I have to think, someone without your business pedigree might tackle it a little differently, right?
I think it's a good point. It's a positive and it's also negative, and depending on the situation, I guess like everything is in life, right?
Mhm.
So the negative is sometimes, as a finance and accounting professional, as you know, you're focused on risk aversion, right? Like the CEO goes around and has all the crazy ideas, and then you have an entire operational execution team that needs to ensure that it works, and the finance person has to ensure that the numbers work out. So you're naturally professionally trained to calculate risks and ensure that nothing crazy is being done, right? And so, but as an entrepreneur, you sometimes have to take crazy risks. You need to be aware of that. But and to me, that was a huge change in approach because I was trained to fear risks and to be careful about them and to ensure they're like legally set and financially set. And so now you don't have that safety net at all. And so that was a little bit harder. I think what is helpful, obviously, is aside from the network, etc., is obviously going through a problem from multiple dimensions, right? Like not only looking at it from one-sided approach, which you see a lot in a lot of companies. And this is more around, what does it mean from a product perspective? What does it mean from a marketing perspective? But also what does it mean from an accounting and finance and legal perspective? And oftentimes, there are, we used to joke in our profession, oh, this person or that person is a walking lawsuit, right? Like it's like, this was always like the joke in finance, right? And when I say that, people don't think it's funny, but finance people always think it's funny, right? And so, like when you make decisions, you're like, oh boy, that might be pretty bad. Don't do that. This could have like a lot of legal implications. So, in that perspective, it does help.
Interesting. So yeah, I'm always curious, like as, it is fundamentally a business, but it's one that evolves around art. So how do you balance sort of the artistic and financial aspects of the platform in a way that's appealing to, art enthusiasts, excuse me, artists themselves, and of course, investors? Like, how do you, that's going to be a tricky juggling act, to say the least, right?
It is a tricky juggling act, and I honestly like. So first of all, I want to say some things. Number one, I didn't know, Jack, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but obviously the majority of the GDP in the United States is driven by small businesses, and I did not know that. And when I saw the numbers, I was like, oh my God, there's so many of me out here, and they're very successful.
There's only one you, but yes, I know what you mean.
And so I think, small businesses, entrepreneurship is actually quite common here. So from that perspective, it is something I'm learning every day. I think I understand why startups fail. I kind of feel like we could have failed so many times. And it's the juggling elements, different interests, but at the same time, always staying focused. Obviously, as the founder of a company, you're the driver of the machine. So if you're not motivated or you don't want to do things or you're not pushing things forward, it's not moving anywhere. So I think being able to juggle all of those things without a safety net, without a big admin arm that supports you or big budgets that support you, it's tough. So I had to learn that, and I'm still learning it. Sometimes I'm good at it, sometimes I'm really bad at it. I would say right now I'm more on the medium range. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, well, everything's a learning curve. And I'm sure you'll master it in time. But I have a question, because probably we both struggle with this, but and it's the same thing for both of us. But whether you want to be or not, you're the face of Exverso in the same way I'm the face of the CFO Leadership Council. Of course, no one really particularly wants to look at my face. But how do you deal with that? Since, from what I know about you, you're kind of a humble person. And does that put a lot of pressure on you?
It did, actually. When I started with If So What, it was really funny because we were looking for our first PR agencies because we needed to create like PR stories, etc. And I was asking my team members if they could be the face. And so that was completely rejected because people were like, no, 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 nobody cares about, what XYZ says. It's important that the founder is on front of things. That was really, really hard for me. It still is, but I'm more used to it. So as you can see on my website, there's an about page, my face is on it. But it was a rougher. I really don't like to draw attention to myself. So this is something that I do not enjoy that much.
Yeah, it was probably easier for me since I'm a bit of an attention, throw myself in the spotlight. But yeah, when I tell my sisters, all of whom are brats, I'm the face of the company, they're like, come on, get somebody else to be the face of the company. You're not a good looking man if you don't know. So it's like,
Yeah, I would. You can take over my company if you like to be the face of my company. You will probably do much better than
do
it
you
is.
really want this to be the face of an art-based company? I don't think so. So
we are open for everybody. It's and you would be doing fantastic.
oh, well, yeah, I can barely draw a straight line with a ruler, but other than that, you can't question my artistic skills. So, but I'm curious, and again, this industry, when I interview CFOs from software companies, it's a very natural thing for me to do. I can ask some good questions. So, I do apologize if some of these questions are, maybe not up to the level you're used to, but I'm just curious. So, what are the trends that are coming up in digital art and NFTs that excite you the most, and maybe worry you the most too?
I think that it's interesting because I don't feel like I'm really part of the NFT community, but in a weird way I am. I'm part of Web3, but I'm also part of Web2. I'm part of the old art industry, but I'm also part of the new art industry. So I'm kind of like swimming around in all these different type of genres. But what we are saying and what I'm seeing is a lot of, obviously there was a big hype and in 2019, 2020, 2021 around NFTs and, a lot of big values, and now they're not valued anymore. And so it went like, and then also when you think about, the percentages of increase and decreases, and it's almost like, God, where's this coming from, right? So there was like a lot of hypes, I think, which is interesting. I kind of sometimes had the feeling that we're like kind of in 2001 when, internet was totally hyped. I was right before the bubble burst. It kind of felt like that. I think now is a really good time where the true talent is starting to show. So I'm seeing a lot of incredibly good artists. I'm so excited to actually collaborating with them. And the quality of the works is increasing big time. And I think after the hypes, I think there's a lot of focus around people wanting to collect beautiful art, but they also don't want to lose money, right? And which
Right.
totally makes sense because, if you spend that much money, there's the same risk for physical art as well. But generally, if you purchase a piece of art and you spend a lot of money for it, you want to maintain at least its value, even though you have a strong emotional connection. So I think there's a lot of focus on value, focus on beauty, but also there's not really a trend that concerns me. Yeah, I know everybody is talking about AI. I think since I moved to Silicon Valley, the AI was the big topic about everything. And then, people were talking about flying cats, which didn't happen. My AI robot breaks down every 2 months, and I kind of gave up now. And now I have this old school vacuum cleaner. And, there were like all these like scenarios, we're going to be in the Matrix and God knows. And it just doesn't happen so fast. And honestly, I think, yes, technology is moving fast, but it still took a very long time, generally. So I'm not so afraid of artificial intelligence as other people are. And actually, as a matter of fact, many of my artists work with AI, but in a different type of way. So it's not just a prompt, creating like works, but it's really creating their own algorithms to create works that are incredibly unique. But yeah, I think that with technology innovation, there is obviously some people will lose, some people will win, as always. And I see a lot of really positive coming in because the artists are starting to really embrace new innovation big time and become very creative in creating new forms of art with it.
Yeah, it's interesting now. Technology is kind of everything today. there's very few businesses that aren't, based upon technology. So how is Exversio, leveraging technology to enhance the experience, both for artists and for collectors?
I think, I mean, first of all, we make it very easy to purchase the art and to also explore the art. I think we're constantly improving as well. We haven't been around that long, but we're learning a lot from the feedback we're doing. But obviously, when you're online, you can access the art 24/7, right? There's not a store that has like opening hours. And so we are there. You can basically experience digital art 24/7 with us. We made blockchain very simple. That could be also another topic for us, but I really, going back to blockchain, why did we choose blockchain? I just felt like it created a solution to a lot of problems that do exist in the art world. I don't know if you know some of the statistics, but there is an estimate and survey around, that 70 to 80% of all the art in museums, oh my God, please don't kill me, museum people, but are not real. So, or have been looted, and so it's, provenance is a huge problem for art because, yeah, you might have a certificate on paper, but, that's gonna, disappear over time. And it becomes more complicated the older the work is and if the artist is dead. And so, but, the nature of artists, if the artist is dead and was already famous in his lifetime, then usually, the work becomes even more valuable. So age matters. And so technology can solve this because once it's certified in the blockchain, it's indestructible. It's evidence that can never ever go away, unless of course we don't have blockchain and technology anymore. But aside from that, it would probably exist as long as the technology exists. And so it creates this problem, this huge problem around provenance and authenticity. And the other big innovation of blockchain is the fact that artists now can obtain royalties. So in the past, physical artists who oftentimes when they start off their careers, they're unknown, they're happy when they sell their works, right? And then, and that happens to be that some savvy art collector sees the work and realizes, oh my God, this person is a genius and it's going to become very, very famous. And later on sells the work for millions in auction. The artist will not get a cut on this. So, which is different than music industry because you have obviously royalties in the music industry, but you didn't have that in the traditional art industry, visual art industry. So
Yeah,
technology now enables that because through blockchain, you can define the royalty system, which we also have done. So we give 20% back to our artists.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I published the book, it was similar, right? Until relatively recently, you wanted to publish a book, there were, 37 people along the way getting a slice of the pie, but you can go through, I won't mention the company, but 100% you've heard of them, but they have a self-publishing tool. And, once I wrote it, within about a number of hours, I was a published author. They made it very easy. And that company gets a very modest royalty off everything I sell through their platform. But other than that, and, it's the early stages of it, but traditional publishing companies have to be a little bit afraid of that model. So
I think it's yeah, exactly. I think anyone in the creative field, but I think it's also a really powerful tool for anything that needs like a permanent ledger. I think for accounting, for real estate. I mean, the list goes on and on. But I think because the technology is still young and they're obviously, greed is always a factor in humanity, unfortunately. And there was a big greed factor that created all these, frauds and bad news. And, with new technology, people are obviously afraid because they don't understand it. And then on top of it, you have like the magnitude of fraud and bad actors. It kind of takes away from the innovation and actually the positive that you can do with this technology. And for us, it's really important that we utilize it in a positive way for things that have an impact for artists and for our industry.
fantastic. So I want to get back to, your background a little bit. And this is one of those things I scratch my head. I'm like, did I take these notes accurately? So your next startup is going to be focused on cats. Did I get that right? Was I smoking
Oh,
something
you are
when we
giving
met a
away
couple
now
of
my
weeks ago?
secret.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we need to cut that out?
No, first I have to bring the startup to the, no, I'm just kidding. No, we can
Okay.
talk about it, but I didn't, yeah, no, so I have big plans after Exverso, so I have to first build it and make it big. I'm very focused on alternative treatments, and I have a story behind that because I grew up in a household that was very medical focused. My parents were doctors, and I was surrounded and by very sick or dead people. And it sounds very horrible, but this is just the way I grew up. And my father was a emergency surgeon. So oftentimes I wouldn't see him for many, many days. He was like on the highway putting things together from human that just got killed and, getting the arms and the legs and what have you. So obviously a very medical, a very hands-on operational perspective, I would say, my father has. And and he always says, like, very pragmatically, if he wouldn't have had like the opportunity of putting people together, he would have been probably like a plumber or like an architect, something like that, or construction worker. It's like a very hands-on operational execution perspective, and without any sort of sense for beauty or aesthetics or emotional concepts. And so I was always extremely skeptical. I was always, I think it's just my nature, but I always had a lot of questions. And so we had like all these like magazines of how to, medical journals, etc. But then we also had this small amount of alternative medicine journals at home. And the only person who ever read those was me. And so I asked the question, I said, instead of pumping people up with all this chemical stuff, there's all this, knowledge, this wisdom of these ancient tribes and the shamans of how to, work on, different illnesses with plants, right? And, my family was always, oh my God, she's crazy. She's like on this voodoo, crazy, whatever, hippy dippy, whatever they called it, like trip. And so let's not even talk to her. She's not even being scientific. And and I think, now there's a lot of knowledge around, science has developed as well, right? And we're learning so much about us humans as a species, but we're learning also so much about behavior of cats or other animals. I mean, AI has created a program on how to communicate with whales, right? Eventually, we will have an opportunity to understand whales once they are able to translate it. And I think that we're realizing, what, there is so much more that to life and to species that we know that science cannot just simply explain. And I think one of the interesting things for me are alternative treatments and learning about plants, learning about different type of ingredients. And it's just so interesting to me. And this is something I feel very passionate about, and obviously this is it's a very hypothetical construct right now, but it's something I spend my time with, the spare time I have. So it's just very interesting to me, and I want to explore that. There was another, similarly to art, this was a topic that I was very interested in, just because I just saw a lot of results with it. I experimented with my cats. They're doing really, really well. They're healthy. And I saw the results, and I thought this is very positive, so maybe there are way more ways than we just know, than traditional medicine knows or pharmaceutical industry prescribes you to do. So this is something I'm very interested in.
Interesting. And I just can't help but comment that we can communicate with whales, because there was actually one of the Star Trek movies was based upon that. They had to go back in time to like the 1980s, and for some reason they had to like talk to a humpback whale. I forget the premise of why that was, but yeah, so they could have used your technology had they known about it. So
unfortunately, it's not my technology.
Yeah.
It's good. It's one of some of the best AI engineers right now
Oh,
in the
yeah,
valley,
yeah.
and they were talking about this. But it's interesting. I guess everything that a human mind can imagine can become a reality in many ways.
Absolutely. So I like to talk a little about fun facts for people.
Okay.
And you have 2 or 3 that I could think of. But what would you say if someone asked you like a fun fact or a talent or passion that people might be surprised about you. And I know how I would answer the question if I were you, but let's see how you answer it.
Oh, interesting. And I think I answered that, but now I'll try to remember which example I took. I have a lot of funny things
Yeah,
that
you're
did
an
not.
unending list.
I think one of the funny things was I was a singer in a punk band.
Yeah, that was the one I was thinking of. So tell us about that. You say was, so you're not doing it anymore, obviously. So
No, no, no. But it was at the time, when we were growing up as teenagers. I grew up. Oh, actually I was supposed to talk about this because we have a big reunion with all my friends from high school, and we have like this chat, and they started sharing all these pictures from us when we were young, when we were teenagers, and a lot of the things I forgot about. And we were extremely creative. So we had a group of friends who were, I mean, many of them are artists and designers, by the way. And so we always had like we created a lot of stories. We used photography. We created photography stories. And we just were all into art and music. And this was really important. And we grew up in a small town that nobody knows except for people from this town. I'm supposed to mention that. And then it's at the Dutch border, so it's Germany, but it looks like the Netherlands. And there's absolutely nothing. I mean, there's some forest, some farms, and it was a really, really beautiful upbringing because there wasn't anything really. We had to create something, and so it was natural for us that everybody would be like into drawing, into painting, into music, into acting. So we did a lot of creative stuff. So I was always constantly busy. And then, it happened to be there was this band. It was really funny. It was a great setup. And they were looking for a singer. And so I said, okay, let's try it out. And so I was a singer there.
how about that? Was it original music or did you cover like the Clash and the Ramones and other punk bands?
Oh no, yeah, we had some cover songs as well, but we did our own songs. But it was really funny because so the drummer was a songwriter, and he broke up with his girlfriend, who was now the girlfriend of the bass guitar player. So I was singing his songs about the breakup while the new boyfriend was also in the band. So this was a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you artsy folks, the things you get yourself into. So can I persuade you to sing a couple of bars from Rapture by Blondie?
No, no,
Oh,
not today.
okay.
Next time
Maybe-
when we meet, I take
okay.
you to karaoke.
That sounds good. And you have a long list of things, but I think that might be the most interesting. I often close this with asking folks for their advice for the next generation of CFOs, and I want to just put a little different twist on that.
Okay.
What's your advice for people who are CFOs or in similar professions that I don't want to say escape from it, but it's not their passion, but they want to pursue their passion much like you did. Do you have any advice for people to do that? Because CFO is a great job. You're well respected, it pays well, it's interesting work, you work with good people, and yet you're much happier for leaving it to do your passion. So what's your advice for people to just kind of do it?
Um, I think this is sad. It brings all these memories, and it brings also at the time when I decided I'm going to follow a separate route. My friends thought, oh, she's going to be homeless, which is also nice because they treated me for nice dinners, got me some really nice concert tickets, etc. But they really thought, oh my God, she's falling off the wheelhouse, and she's going to be on the streets, and it was really funny to see. And it was interesting to see all these fears of people around you. Yes, of course, the reality is you have to pay your bills, you have duties, you have responsibilities. That's all part of it. But at the same time, when you do such a big career switch, people do project out their own fears on you, which happens a lot. And so, and you are already in doubt, right? It wasn't like, oh, yes, easily, let me just like give up my a well-paying job, my 500 assistants, and all the good stuff. 500 is exaggerated, of course, but
Of course,
the
yeah.
good life, and the good life in quotation marks. But I think you just have to do it. I think there's even, yeah, you got to make a plan a little bit around, financing and, how to finance stuff and how to pay your bills. But ultimately, you just have to do it. Because there is no scenario that you can go through in terms of probability that will prepare you for what's coming your way, because it's
That
all unknown. It's just unknown, and you just have to go for it.
Yeah, it is. Entrepreneurship is one of those things you can't do it, halfway. You either do it or you don't do it for most people. So,
Absolutely. You either do it or you don't.
cool, great.
And I think in general, it has nothing to do with CFOs who want to leave their job and follow their passion. I think it's for everybody, really. But I think it's really important to um, try not to make decisions based on fears. I think that is super important for every human. Because if you're afraid and you're not doing the things that you can do, that you could potentially do because you're afraid, I think that's a very sad life. It's actually a wasted life in my perspective, because every person has a reason to be here, and every person should follow what they love. And I think that fear is such a hindering factor for so many reasons. I mean, and bad decisions, and also unfulfilled lives, unhappy lives. And I think it's really important to take, everybody has fears. I have fears, you have fears, but to take the fear as part of the process and accept it, and also utilizing it as something to overcome.
That makes a lot of sense. So cool. Well, so this has been a wonderful interview. I know you got a lot going on, so I thank you for making the time for it. And I just want to give you the last word if there's anything you'd like to say.
Oh, Jack, I thank you so much. I mean, first of all, I enjoyed this interview so much. I thank you so much for inviting me. Obviously, you and your team, fantastic. Keep up the great work. I love what you're doing. And yeah, and hopefully we're going to meet again soon.
I would like that very much. Thanks so much, So.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.